Beneath the silken sheets, bodies entangle in the heat of the night. But the man senses a shift in the air. His wife feels different today, and his instincts are screaming that something is wrong. Little does he know, this is their final embrace. Today marks the end, for their marriage was never born of love. It was merely a cold, calculated contract from the very start. She had played a dangerous game back then, lying that she carried his child. It was a desperate gamble, a frantic bid to escape the cold grip of death. She trapped him in wedlock with a vow to produce an heir within 6 months. But time has run out. 6 months have vanished like smoke, and she remains childless, bringing him nothing but endless trouble. Elizabetha cannot bear the guilt any longer. She refuses to be a shackle around his neck, weighing down his future. Having failed her end of the bargain, her only choice is to flee into the shadows. Besides, a greater mission calls to her, one she cannot ignore. She steels her resolve to vanish, praying he finds a better life without her. Yet, a selfish whisper in her soul screams against it, refusing to let go. Agony tears at her chest because, in those fleeting 6 months, she committed the one sin not in the contract. She fell in love with him. She may leave, but her heart will remain his prisoner forever. When the sun rises, the man wakes to a cold, empty bed and a blinding rage. His eyes burn as he scans the farewell letter she dared to leave behind. In her elegant script, she cruelly reminds him of their agreement, the clause allowing her departure if she failed to bear a child after half a year. But fate plays a cruel joke. What Elizabetha doesn't know is that life has already sparked within her. She is carrying his legacy, a child of the dragon bloodline. The audacity of this woman knows no bounds. Not only does she dare to run from him, but she is stealing his most precious treasure, his unborn heir. Lee's fury erupts like a volcano. He commands his guards to lock down the entire kingdom. The hunt is on, and he will tear the world apart to find his princess. Elizabetha Aska will learn that there is no escape from his grasp. But before we witness his wrath, let us rewind the clock to where this tragedy began. The land of Elizabetha's birth was once a jewel of civilization. It stood as the greatest empire the continent had ever known, a beacon of absolute power. 700 years ago, a calamity struck when the great dragon descended, intent on reducing the entire continent to ash and ruin. 5 powerful sorcerers, disciples of the beast, made a fateful choice. To save humanity, they betrayed their master, engaging the dragon in a cataclysmic battle. Against all odds, they slew the beast and rose from the rubble to forge a new dawn, the birth of the glorious Argan Empire. For centuries, Argan was the heart of the world, respected and adored. It reigned supreme until, in a single day, destiny turned its back on them. Ruthless barbarians from the frozen north swarmed the borders like locusts, burning the legacy of Argan to the ground in a storm of fire and blood. Their cruelty knew no mercy. They sought to extinguish the royal bloodline entirely. When news spread that the princess had escaped, the hunt began. Elizabetha knows capture means death. She runs until her lungs burn. But fate is cruel. She has stumbled directly into the heart of the enemy camp. To make matters worse, she is stained with fresh blood. Just hours ago, she took the life of a Corps soldier who dared to lay filthy hands on her. Yet, the memory's a blur. Elizabetha could swear she barely touched him. She hadn't even cast a spell when the man suddenly combusted, exploding into a visceral mess before her eyes. Confusion reigns, but survival instinct takes over. Drenched in his blood, with the corpse at her feet, she knows the truth won't save her. No one would believe the word of a fallen princess over the body of their comrade. Now, she crouches in the shadows of an empty tent, heart pounding as the chaotic footsteps of soldiers thunder outside. They have found the body. The shouts confirm they are hunting the killer. The walls are closing in, and for a terrifying moment, she considers ending her own life. But she freezes. She cannot die here. She carries the weight of a fallen empire and the crushing expectations of her brother upon her shoulders. He didn't sacrifice everything to transfer his magical essence into her just for her to give up in a dirty tent. Flashback to days prior, Andre, her twin, works frantically to cover her skin in protective magic circles, sealing her fate. As he prepares to send her away, she clings to his robes, tears streaming, begging him to flee with her. But the Emperor stands firm, his resolve unshakable. He is the ruler of the great Argan Empire. He will not abandon the imperial palace. He will stand as its final shield. Even if his sister must survive as a slave, she must live. As for him, He chooses to embrace an honorable death amidst the flames of his kingdom. With a burst of magic, he teleports her away, leaving her with a single haunting command: survive. That is her only mission: stay alive, so the Empire does not truly die. Survive, so she can one day return to give him a proper burial. The memory of his plea snaps her back to reality. The knife drops from her hand. Suicide is not an option. She is the heir to the throne, the last beating heart of the imperial family. Even if only for her brother's memory, she must endure this hell. The princess's mind races, formulating a plan. She must escape this camp and make for the regal empire, their last remaining ally. But her hope shatters instantly. Heavy footsteps stop right outside her hiding spot. They aren't just searching, they are hunting someone specific. And as she turns, Elizabetha realizes with horror that the tent was never empty. A man stands in the shadows with her. And not just any soldier, it is the terrifying Archduke of Vanula, Leet Kirsten. This is not their first encounter. Their fates crossed 3 years ago at a lavish banquet held in honor of her brother's birthday. Back then, she was the jewel of Argon, the beloved princess whose brilliance outshone the stars. Andre dotted on her with such intensity that whispers filled the court, rumors suggesting the Emperor's love for his sister went far beyond sibling affection. The wheels of fate began turning at that fateful banquet. It was the first time Elise laid eyes on Leet Kirsten. Curiosity bloomed within her, but her brother's warning cut through the air like a blade. Stay away. Whispers plagued the Archduke's existence. Though called the Northern Emperor's half-brother, the court knew the dark truth. No blood bound him to the king. Bound. His mother carried him long before she ever entered the palace to marry the late emperor. To silence the vipers claiming he was unworthy, Leet destroyed his own humanity. He transformed himself into a living weapon of war. Desperate to prove his worth, he paved his brother's path to the throne with blood and steel. For his loyalty, he was crowned Archduke. As captain of the Knights of Vanula, he remained undefeated, crushing every army in his path. The world soon learned to fear the man known as the Emperor's Warhound. But Andre saw the monster within. Nothing good comes from a man like Leet Kirsten. Yet now, fate plays a cruel joke. Elise is trapped in the very lion's den her brother feared, alone with the Warhound himself. Despair washes over her. It is over. Leet surely remembers her face from that banquet years ago. He knows the truth. She is the missing princess of a fallen dynasty. Trembling, our girl prepares for the end. At least in death, she will reunite with her brother. She waits for the fatal strike. But the silence stretches on. Instead of a blade, she meets a bow. The Duke dismisses his men and drops to one knee in reverence. Is this a dream? Why would the enemy commander lower himself to serve her, even offering to cleanse her wounds? Bewildered by this display, she grants him permission to touch her. As he tends to her, her mind races back to the bloodshed, that strange power that burst from her, claiming a soldier's life. Was it the protective magic Andre left her, or has something ancient awakened within her veins? Confusion swirls, but one truth seems clear. Leet does not look at her with the eyes of an enemy. Hope begins to bloom. Perhaps she can leave this hell alive. Oh, my sweet summer child, it seems you have forgotten the danger of the Warhound. Just as her guard lowers, reality crashes back in. One of Leet's subordinates enters the tent. Sir Reuben arrives with a report, only to freeze in horror. The fugitive murderer they have hunted is right here. She is hiding in his captain's sanctuary, but before he can act, Leet commands him to halt. Elise is no ordinary woman. Leet's voice is cold as ice. She is the last blood of the Argon imperial family. Show her the utmost respect. It sounds noble, until the other shoe drops. After all, royalty deserves dignity before their execution. The words strike her like a physical blow. Now she understands Andre's fear. This man is not a savior, he is a demon in human skin. Imagine tending to a victim with such gentleness, only to reveal it is merely preparation for the slaughter. Truly twisted. This is Elise's nightmare reality. The beautiful tyrant even offers her a meal. But how can food pass her lips when the Reaper is waiting at the door? She would have preferred a swift death on the battlefield over this cruel kindness. Outside the tent, the whispers of soldiers turn into a roar. They crave her blood. They question why their captain hesitates. It seems Leet awaits a final decree from the Emperor. To them, she is no longer royalty to be feared, but the remnant of a fallen kingdom to be crushed. Their cruel words confirm her worst fear. Andre is truly gone. Grief and rage war within her heart, her only shield. Her family has turned to ash. But tears will not save her now. Andre's warning has become his last will and testament. She must survive. Our girl wipes away her tears. Sorrow hardens into steel. If she is to live, she must become a shadow and spy on the Vanula camp. Knowledge is the only weapon she has left. Straining her ears, she catches a conversation that changes everything. A state secret. The king is desperate for an heir, but Leet is no ordinary man. He is a dragonborn, and no ordinary woman can survive bearing the child of such a monster. Elise frowns. This contradicts every history book she has read. The Leet standing before her defies the legends. Dragonborns are supposed to be mindless beasts, aberrations prone to madness, but truth matters less than leverage. She will seize this secret and turn it into her lifeline. It seems madness runs in the Conqueror's family. The brothers are two sides of the same twisted coin. When Leet returns, he brings no food, but a gleaming dagger. The Emperor has sent his command. Elise is given two paths to the grave. Choice 1, end her own life with honor. Choice 2, be dragged to the capital of Vanula and executed like a common dog. He frames the suicide as a final mercy, a way to keep her royal pride intact before her enemies. But Elise refuses to fade into history. She is not ready to die. Her counterattack begins now. Her eyes lock onto her target, Sir Leet, the strongest entity in Vanula, the Dragonborn himself. She will weaponize his bloodline against him. With a steady voice that betrays no fear, she looks him in the eye and asks, "And what if I refuse the first option?" He vows to escort her back to Vangela personally, ensuring no harm comes to her. These are the exact words Elise has been hunting for. She refuses to end her life, but she has trapped him. Since Letta pledged to keep her safe, the weight of her life now rests on his shoulders. Without hesitation, she drives the knife into her own body. She is betting everything that Sir Lay is a man of honor. This act is calculated. It will crush him with guilt and force him to watch her every move, which is exactly what Elise desires. She is prepared to sacrifice it all, her dignity, this man, and her own flesh. She will burn everything to survive. No matter the hell she must endure, she will stand tall. She is the last blood of the Argan family. Sorette is completely baffled by this fallen princess. He may be a twisted soul, but she is something else entirely. She harms herself the moment he looks away. Yet, instinct tells him the truth. This princess does not want to die. It feels like she is maneuvering him, trying to pull him to her side. But he cannot help but respect her intellect. She is weaponizing the Emperor's own command to guarantee her safety. Our male lead is pulled into the past. He remembers the first time he laid eyes on her at that banquet years ago. The world whispered of her beauty, and he could only agree. That was the day she quietly conquered his frozen heart. But right now, no one is more frustrated than Elise. It does not matter how well she acts or what scheme she spins. This man is a stone wall. He refuses to speak a single word to her. She snaps and confronts him directly. How many more times must I bleed? How many stab wounds until I earn a conversation? Letty finally breaks. He begs her to cherish her own body, but Elise scoffs at the concern. She's walking toward death anyway. Her eyes focus on his hand. No ring. Her suspicion is confirmed. The man is unmarried. It makes sense. The dark rumors about him have spread across the continent. No noble family would dare wed their daughter to a half-human monster. Secretly, Elise agrees with them. The Dragonborn are not just violent, they are a cursed race. Half-human, half-dragon, walking disasters who must kill regularly just to silence the madness raging within them. However, she is not foolish enough to speak her mind. She wears a mask, pretending she understands Lette and holds no fear of him. But she steps on a landmine when she mentions the king's desire for an heir. Lette's fury flares. He is not a heartless beast. He knows the cost. Carrying a child for a Dragonborn is a death sentence for a human woman, and he refuses to inflict that fate. He suddenly notices her trembling like a leaf. He cannot understand. Why cling to him if she is so terrified? But her next words shatter his world. Elise suggests the impossible, that she might be different. She speaks of legends. Her ancestors were the dragon's apprentices. The ancient power flows through the Argan imperial bloodline. Letta realizes the truth. She is trying to win him over. She is desperately searching for a connection, a thread of fate to gain his sympathy. Confusion washes over him. Why stoop this low? She should have chosen an honorable death instead of this shameful, manipulative path. Annoyance rises in his chest. He tells her coldly that he can offer her no salvation, and even if he could, he would never choose to help her. He demands she stop fooling around and disgracing herself. But Elise is iron-willed. No matter what she offers, even crying and kneeling to beg for her life, Letta remains an unmoving mountain. Elise finds his family sickeningly hypocritical. Kneeling before him is a sin, but watching her kill herself is acceptable. Still, he is her target, her only hope. She swallows her rage and does not upset him. She makes a simple plea. She begs him to stay by her side, to never leave her alone to the darkness, not even for a moment. Elise is determined to trap him. She kisses his hand, a dying woman's last wish, and the innocent Letta, his heart betrays him, and he falls for her trap. Nightmares claim her. She stands before her brother Andre. She confesses her deepest regret not taking the throne herself. If she had, the executioner's blade would have found her, not him. He could have lived to restore their glorious empire. She feels worthless, good for nothing. But her brother's phantom shakes his head. She is the core of everything. Without her, he would be dust. He tells her she is greater, more magnificent than she believes. But Elise knows it is a lie. Her plan is vile. If her brother knew the truth, he might despise her. Yet, she will pay any price to live. She will sacrifice her soul just for the chance to go back and bury her brother. Licid holds vigil over the sleeping princess. He hears her weeping, sees her shivering from the cold. Rumors called her weak, but seeing her broken like this, a part of him stirs. The part that fell in love with her 3 years ago screams to hold her, but he freezes. He forces himself to stop. Even back then, he knew a monster could never approach the sun. He was a man consumed by darkness, and she was the light that pierced his shadows. But those feelings, they never died. That is why he cannot stop himself from caring for her. His tenderness confuses even Elise, who wakes up unable to understand this man. Guilt pricks at our heroine's heart. She feels the weight of what she is about to do to this kind soul. She steels herself and tells him she has a request. As the capital draws near, she prays his anger will be tempered, regardless of her actions. After all, she did only what was necessary to survive in this unforgiving world. Les stares at her, unable to grasp the hidden meaning behind her words. But to Elise, his confusion is irrelevant. She refuses to be remembered as a madwoman, determined instead to make him recognize her undeniable value. The long march back to Vanilla begins under the open sky. True to his solemn vow, Les remains a constant shadow by her side, never letting her drift from his sight. Intimacy is forced upon them as they ride a single steed. When night falls and camp is set, the atmosphere grows heavy. Elise feels the weight of the soldiers' gazes, staring yet avoiding her like a plague. Self-consciousness creeps in. Like any maiden in her position, she frets over her appearance, painfully aware of the grime and disarray that clings to her. Desperate to cleanse herself, she sets her sights on a nearby lake, but as she turns to leave alone, Lead intervenes, insisting he accompany her into the darkness. The poor man's motives are innocent enough. He likely fears she might try to end her own life in the deep waters. However, to the eavesdropping soldiers, his demand sounds far more scandalous. Even Elise is taken aback, but then a realization strikes like lightning. This misunderstanding is the perfect weapon for her plan. A scheme forms in her mind. She needs these soldiers to believe there is something private, illicit, and deeply intimate happening between them. Under the moonlight, they reach the water's edge. While Letty innocently checks the temperature, consumed by worry for her safety, Elise is preoccupied with a far more dangerous game calculating exactly how to test his resolve. Until now, the man has remained a wall of stone, showing zero interest in her charms save for that one vulnerable moment when he cradled her feverish body in his arms. Desperate to test her scheme, Elise attempts a seductive gambit to disrobe before him, yet the man remains unmoved, a stone fortress against her charms. She feigns a need to bathe, using it as an excuse to shed her layers. But before the act goes too far, he intervenes to stop her. With gentle firmness, he readjusts her clothing, chiding her about catching a cold. Letsit is no fool. He sees right through her performance. He realizes this is merely a test of his resolve. His warning is sharp: stop these childish games, for he will never aid her cause. Humiliation flushes Elise's cheeks, a royal princess, reduced to degrading herself before the enemy commander. Yet, no matter how much she abandons her dignity, his moral code remains unbreakable. He coldly states they will reach an inn by tomorrow. The excuse for a bath in the wild evaporates instantly. She respects his honor, but that very virtue fills her with dread. How can he ever forgive her when she plans to destroy that reputation in Vanula? 1.5 months later, their journey reaches its peak. Elise finally enters the majestic territories of the great empire of Vanula, but they have barely set foot inside when calamity strikes. The beastly fourth prince of Ugal, Januk Seaheart, has appeared, and he has come to claim the princess. Elise's resolve hardened into cold steel. She would sooner perish by a Vanula blade than be dragged to Ugal by Yannick, the very architect of her kingdom's ruin. The enemy prince's voice dripped with arrogance as he unveiled a twisted truth. It was his obsession that orchestrated this tragedy, having begged the Vanilla Emperor to deliver Elise into his clutches. Yannick had been consumed by rumors of her ethereal beauty for years. His fascination had rotted into a dark obsession, a hunger to possess the fallen princess solely for his own pleasure. When he had hunted for her amidst Argan's ashes, she had slipped through his fingers. Now, finding her at last, Yannick prepared to seize his prize and depart, victory gleaming in his eyes. But Elise was no helpless damsel. Her mana surged silently, a deadly trap lying in wait. The moment his filthy hands grazed her skin, she would trigger the magic circle and take him down to hell with her. Suddenly, a towering figure intervened lead step between them, his presence like an iron wall. He had no regard for the foreign prince's status or his rising fury. His voice cut through the tension, cold and absolute. He declared that no command had been issued to surrender the princess, effectively challenging Yannick's authority right there and then. Until the Emperor himself spoke the word, Elise was going nowhere. Leed's eyes burned with a possessive intensity as he made his stance clear. For now, she belonged to him alone, leaving Yannick seething in his wake. Leed swept Elise away into the safety of the palace depths. He then marched straight to the throne room to confront his brother, the ruler of Vanula, Emperor Nuer. The Emperor sat upon his throne, eyes narrowing in calculation. He had anticipated the princess would be a burden, yet he felt a flicker of disappointment that she had chosen captivity over an honorable suicide. The Argan bloodline was renowned for its pride. For Elise to endure such humiliation and travel all the way to Vanula, Nuer suspected a hidden agenda, a scheme cloaked in surrender. Leed's mind flashed back to the desperate words Elise had whispered to him, her true intentions echoing in his memory, but his train of thought was brutally severed. The Emperor's decree rang out like a death knell. He intended to hand Elise over to the savages of Ugal after all. Revulsion churned in Leed's stomach. The Ugal plan was barbaric, to behead royalty and parade her severed head as a trophy. Surely, his brother possessed more dignity than to allow such a travesty. Thankfully, the Emperor still clung to a shred of imperial pride. He refused to let the last flower of Argan be reduced to a grotesque sideshow for the masses. Instead, he offered a mercy that was hardly better. A public hanging, followed by the surrender of her corpse. The verdict was set in stone in just 5 short days. Elise's life would end. Neuer sighed, gazing into the distance. It was a pity Argan had crumbled. If only young Emperor Andre had bent the knee instead of breaking under his own stubborn pride. A simple political gesture could have saved a kingdom. The Emperor rambled on about strategy and history, but silence met his words. He glanced down. Leed was no longer listening. Leed stood frozen, the world narrowing down to a single, terrifying thought. 5 days, that was all she had left. His brother's voice faded into white noise against the pounding of his own heart. New Year's sharp gaze pierced through his brother's stoic mask. Leed attempted to compose himself, but it was futile. The Emperor had known him since childhood. Nothing escaped his notice. A knowing smirk tugged at the Emperor's lips. The distraction. The intensity, it could only mean one thing. Something profound had shifted between Leed and the captive princess. Leed vehemently denied the accusation. He had to shield Elise's honor at all costs, bearing the complicated truth of her desperate attempt to seduce him deep within his heart. The king finally drops the interrogation, begging Leed to just look at the list of potential brides on the table. The poor monarch looks like he's about to crumble into dust from pure impatience. The king's voice dripped with cold ambition as he stared down his brother. He reminded Leet of the sole reason he was granted a title. It wasn't for honor. It was to breed, to produce heirs that would secure the throne's power. But Liet refused to be a pawn in this twisted game. He forced the monarch to face the grim reality. He described exactly what would happen if a fragile human woman tried to carry a dragon seed. It was a death sentence. Even if she miraculously succeeded in conceiving, the pregnancy would consume her. She would perish in agony long before the child ever saw the light of day. Yet, the king remained unmoved by the cruelty of it. He refused to give up. He pointed to history, to the one exception that fueled his obsession, his own mother, a human woman who had successfully borne a dragonborn. If their mother could endure the torment and give birth to Liet, surely another woman could do the same. The king saw women not as people, but as vessels for power. Sickened by the madness, Liet had heard enough. He turned his back on the throne and stormed out. He ignored the furious shouts behind him, the scolding for his stubbornness, and the curse that he would die alone. But beneath his stoic mask, rage burned like wildfire. Nuer spoke of their mother's achievement, but he conveniently forgot the cost, the devastating price she paid. He remembered the horror. After hours of torturous labor, her life didn't end in joy. It ended in slaughter. The baby had ripped her stomach open to enter the world. That was the curse of the Dragonborn. They entered life by tearing their mothers apart. Liet vowed never to inflict that fate on another. He resolved to flee to his territory immediately, before the king's delusions turned into orders. However, a tether pulled at his heart. He couldn't leave the capital, not without seeing Elise one last time. When he finally stood before her cell, his heart shattered at the sight of the princess in chains. Tenderly, he knelt to help her. He wrapped cloth around her bruised wrists, shielding her delicate skin from the biting cold of the handcuffs. Elise stared at him, baffled. She couldn't understand this man's kindness, but in her desperate position, understanding wasn't a luxury she could afford. If she could use him to survive, she would. Alone again in the cold darkness, she tried to formulate a plan, but her solitude was interrupted. An unwelcome visitor strolled in the vile, disgusting Janoxy. He hadn't come to gloat. He was on a mission. He knew the secret that Elise guarded with her life, that her brother Andre had poured his final magic into her before he died. Now, the predator was here to claim it. Terror seized Elise's heart. The magic circles were invisible to ordinary eyes, seen only by her and Andre. It was supposed to be a secret bond between siblings. How did this enemy know? But Janoxy didn't care about her confusion. He didn't need a confession. All he needed was to verify if she was a vessel for sorcery. Once confirmed, he would execute her without hesitation. He reached out, his filthy hand inching toward her. Panic surged through Elise. She knew she had the power to stop him, but fear paralyzed her limbs. She was frozen. But before he could defile her, a shadow swept across the cell. Liet crashed onto the scene, pummeling the barbarian into the ground. Elise watched, wide-eyed and confused. His intentions were a mystery. Why would a high-ranking archduke care for a death row prisoner? He wasn't just visiting, he was protecting her with a ferocity that defied logic. She knew one thing for certain: the emperor had definitely not ordered this. This act of salvation was personal. Whether he did it out of knightly duty or something more, she didn't care. She whispered her thanks, but as he turned away, unseen tears streamed down her face. She cried not for her impending death, but for him. She apologized silently to his retreating back, because to save herself, she was about to ruin his entire life. The sun rose on a calm, peaceful morning, a beautiful day for a walk, or to execute a princess. No, seriously, today was the day Elise would die. The capital buzzed with morbid excitement. Everyone flocked to the execution grounds, eager to watch the continent's most beautiful woman take her final breath. Some hoped for a dramatic magical escape, others just wanted blood. It was a carnival of cruelty. The entire country seemed to revel in the perverse gossip of her demise, but not everyone shared in the bloodlust. While the masses rushed to the square, Liet was on the other side of the city, grimly loading his carriage. Sir Reuben watched his master with shock. He couldn't believe the Archduke was leaving so easily, without even a backward glance. He had expected Liet to storm the execution grounds, or at least say a final goodbye. The entire army had whispered about the undeniable chemistry between the two. The Archduke had served her faithfully for 2 months, Rumors of a secret intimacy had spread like wildfire through the barracks. But seeing his master's cold, unfeeling efficiency, Reuben began to doubt everything. The Archduke seemed determined to wash his hands of her. Lidi was set on his course. After today, he would vanish from the capital, leaving the politics and the pain behind for a very long time. But fate had other plans. A maid rushed up, breathless and frantic. The emperor demanded his presence immediately. The Argan princess had pulled a move that changed everything. In the throne room, the atmosphere was suffocating. Elise stood before the emperor, who waited with a sneer for her final words. Elise knew this was it. She couldn't accept an honorable death. She didn't want to die a martyr. She remembered the coward she used to be, the princess who turned her back on the people of Argan, who ran away to save her own skin while they suffered. She had to live. Only by surviving could she return to Argan, beg forgiveness from the souls of her people, and build a sanctuary for her lonely, fallen brother. She had visualized this exact moment 1,000 times during her captive journey to Vangela. Every heartbeat had been a rehearsal. She had practiced the perfect lie, a deception so bold it would pause the executioner's blade and give her a second chance at life. With eyes full of determination, she dropped the bombshell. She told the emperor she was pregnant, and the father, it was Kristen Liet. The king reeled. His brother, the man famous for his solitude. The idea of him impregnating a prisoner seemed absurd. If it were any other woman, he would have laughed. But he hesitated. He was painfully aware of his brother's lingering feelings for this specific princess. Narrowing his eyes, the king played his trump card. He reminded Elise that Liet was a dragonborn. A human body could scarcely survive carrying such a child. But our girl was an actress. She feigned pure shock, gasping as if this was the first she had heard of his draconic nature. The king remained suspicious. "Proof," he demanded. "Show me proof of this child." But Elise didn't flinch. She had walked into the lion's den fully prepared. Elise plays her trump card. She reminds the king that her lineage flows with the blood of sorcerers. They don't need doctors. They scan their own life force by reading the mana currents within, a secret art she has mastered. The king's eyes narrow, skepticism dripping from his gaze. He suspects this is nothing more than a desperate performance, a final act to delay the executioner's blade for one more day. And honestly, he isn't entirely wrong. But the court remains silent, for this verdict belongs to only one man. The judgment must come from the source of the chaos himself. Crash! The doors fly open. Kirsten Lied, the Archduke of the North, has arrived, and judging by the dark aura swirling around him, he is far from pleased. He ignores the royal protocol entirely. Before the emperor can even demand an explanation, Lesed demands an audience with the princess. He won't answer a single question until he faces her. He brushes past his brother's fury like it is nothing. Swooping in, he scoops the princess up and storms out of the hall, but this urgency only fuels the emperor's fire, convincing him that Elise's shocking claim might actually be true. The nosy emperor refuses to let it go. He corners Lesed's aide, Sir Reuben, demanding a full report of every breath, look, and whisper shared between the duke and the princess on their journey to the capital. Meanwhile, our male lead is a walking volcano. His patience has snapped, and he is seconds away from a catastrophic explosion. He drags the princess into a shadowed alcove, pinning her with a glare that could cut glass. The interrogation begins immediately. He silences her attempts at an apology. He doesn't want excuses. He wants to know why she would spin such a reckless, useless lie, but Elise meets his gaze evenly. She tells him he already knows the answer deep down. She refuses to die. Not here, not today. She has a mission etched into her soul, and until it is complete, she will claw her way through hell itself to survive. Lesed scoffs, visibly repulsed. He hates that her desperate flailing has dragged him into this tangled web of deceit. He insists she could have found another way, one that didn't involve him. Elise almost laughs at the absurdity. How ironic, coming from the man who was most eager to see her head on a pike. If she had tried any other path, would he have shown mercy? They both know the answer. Lesed's loyalty to his brother is absolute, a chain that cannot be broken. He would have personally ensured her execution. If she had come to him with a logical plan, he would have turned a deaf ear and thrown her to the wolves without a second thought. She reminds him of his own cold vows. He may have shown her fleeting kindness on the road, but kindness does not equal mercy. He never intended for her to survive this trip. In his script, her story was supposed to end today on the execution block. Blood staining the public square. There is no knight in shining armor coming to save her. No one is willing to fight for a fallen princess. So, she must draw her own sword and fight for herself. Since the king is obsessed with an heir, she plays her final card. She promises to bear Lesed a child. Elise looks him dead in the eye, her resolve unshakable, and tells him to use her body as a tool if that's what it takes. It is a perfect exchange. She gets to live, and he gets a permanent shield against the king's nagging demands for an heir. But in her carefully constructed house of cards, Elise overlooked one critical, devastating detail: Lesed's own will. The Duke's expression turns ice cold. He refuses. To carry his child is not a blessing, it is a curse. It is simply the fastest, most wretched way for a woman to die. He finds her proposition laughable. For a man who claims absolute loyalty to the crown, he should be jumping at the chance to fulfill the king's greatest wish. Yet, on this one issue, he is immovable. He refuses marriage. He refuses an heir. And now, here stands Elise, volunteering for a death sentence she doesn't even understand. He mocks her, calling her planned idiocy born of ignorance for someone trying so hard to survive. Elise's hope shatters like glass. She feels the heat of humiliation rising, convinced she must look like an utter fool in front of him. But Lesed doesn't see a fool. She sees him as some honorable statue. But if she could hear the dark, chaotic thoughts that plague his mind whenever he looks at her, she would run in terror. He leans in, voice dropping low, to tell her a truth that is hard to swallow. He admits that while he never would have lifted a finger to save her, he also never would have stopped her from trying to wriggle out of death's grip on her own. If their roles were reversed, he wouldn't be this dignified. He would be on his knees, groveling in the dirt, begging the king for mercy. He would have sold out his country in a heartbeat. He would have traded the secrets of Argan and its ancient treasures just to buy another hour of life. But Elise is different. She would choose death over treason. Her pride is not for herself, but for the nation her brother and her people bled to protect. Lesed is genuinely baffled. If she cares so much about honor, why endure this humiliation? Why didn't she choose a quiet, elegant suicide instead? To Elise's ears, his words are sharp daggers. It sounds like he is simply wishing she had done the job herself and saved everyone the trouble. She knows he has a point. She is powerless. She lacks the strength to change the world or rebuild her fallen kingdom of Argan. Part of her craves that eternal rest. She wanted to die. But her brother's final words haunt her, chaining her to this painful existence. He traded his life so she could keep hers. That sacrifice cannot be in vain. She steals her heart. She must go through with this insane plan. She grips his arm, promising she is different from ordinary women. Lesed almost laughs. What makes her special? The only difference is the faint trace of magic in her blood. And she barely even has that. If her power were worth anything, they wouldn't have been able to drag her all the way to the capital like a sack of potatoes. It is no secret. The whole world knows the fallen princess is as fragile as a wounded bird. He has no interest in betting a woman who can barely stand on her own 2 feet. He turns to leave, tossing over his shoulder that he will return tomorrow to hear her resignation. Elise blocks his path. No, she refuses to back down. Lesed is her only lifeline in this ocean of sharks. She cannot afford to change her mind. She demands an answer now. Will he accept her offer or not? Sir Lesed feels a migraine coming on. He is trapped between a stubborn princess and a nosy king. He wants absolutely nothing to do with this woman or her problems. But then, the king asks the ultimate question, did you share a bed with her? And for the first time, the Duke freezes. Memories flood back, holding her fragile form while she slept. Does that count as sharing a bed? But that split second of hesitation is all the fuel the king needs to spin his own wild narrative. The emperor is absolutely convinced the two have crossed the line into intimacy. No matter how desperately the Archduke tries to explain, his brother has turned a deaf ear to logic. Truth be told, the ruler is just relieved. Finally, his stubborn brother is no longer living the life of a lonely single dog. But hearing the king mention details of their journey, a realization hits him. Sir Reuben must have loosened his tongue. The knight pleads innocence, but the damage is done. He simply reported the facts that Elise and the Archduke spent nearly every waking moment together for a month. Technically, it was the truth. but context is everything. By this point, the Emperor's imagination has run wild. He is fully bought into the romance. Even the Archduke's visit to her prison cell has been twisted. In the king's eyes, it wasn't an interrogation, but a worried father checking on the woman carrying his child. Les is about to explode from pure frustration. If the king has already written the script in his head, why bother asking for the Archduke's opinion at all? Unfortunately, it was a trap. The king was testing his reaction. When Les barged in to take the princess away, he walked right into the snare, confirming every suspicion. However, while the monarch might be overjoyed, he hasn't lost his wits completely. Joy cannot blind a ruler's reasoning. The command has already been given. The court physician is on her way to examine the princess and verify if this pregnancy is real. The king's paranoia runs deep. He doesn't just doubt the pregnancy, he questions the lineage. He fears the child might not belong to the Archduke. His words carry a dark implication. It seems the Emperor suspects an illicit affair occurred between Elise and her own twin brother. The Archduke bristles at hearing Elise spoken of so vilely, but the Emperor's expression darkens. He is prepared to commit atrocities if he feels deceived. He swears a blood oath to his brother. If the princess has lied to the imperial family, he will ensure her remaining days are a living hell. Mercy would be a swift execution. Instead, he plans to hand her over to Yannick, the savage prince of Ugal. She would suffer the same gruesome fate as her brother. The Archduke realizes her life hangs by a thread. He has to act. He looks the king in the eye and swears the princess is not that kind of woman. He argues she is too frail for such deception, and then he drops the final shield, claiming she was a maiden pure and untouched until he laid with her. The Archduke has finally surrendered to the situation. He recalls seeing her once a picture of noble elegance, now reduced to begging for her life. The woman he thought untouchable had fallen so low. At that moment, his frozen heart finally cracked. In the end, the gamble paid off. But back in her quarters, our female lead is drowning in absolute despair. The physician had arrived to check her pulse. Elise had prayed her weak. Erratic heartbeat like that of a dying person would confuse the doctor. But fate is cruel. The woman insisted on drawing blood instead. Elise feels the cold grip of reality. It is over. By sunrise, the king will know her treachery. She managed to buy herself one single day. She drifts into a fitful sleep, her heart heavy with pain. In the haze of dreams, the Archduke appears by her side. Even in sleep, she feels a spike of annoyance. Why haunt her dreams when he refused to help her in reality? She whispers to the phantom Archduke, admitting defeat. He was right all along. Her desperate struggle to survive only tightened the noose around her neck. Our female lead makes a chilling resolve. The moment the truth is exposed, she will end her own life before they can touch her. However, destiny has a twist in store. She wakes up not to an executioner, but to the greatest shock of her life. She's betrothed to the Archduke Elise, stares at the maid delivering the news, unable to process the words. But the evidence is undeniable. The palace has assigned her a personal handmaiden, and now her fiancé has come to visit, concerned after she slept for 3 days straight. Elise ignores the pleasantries. She looks him in the eyes with one question burning in her soul. How is she still breathing? The Archduke reveals the truth. He has accepted her proposal. After weighing the options, he realized he had nothing to lose. By marrying her, he gains a shield. He can finally silence the Emperor's relentless nagging about producing an heir. Furthermore, there is a hidden benefit. Since Elise carries the blood of the heroes who slew the dragon, her presence might suppress the violent, bestial instincts raging within him. He took care of everything. The Archduke even bribed the physician to falsify the results, but he cuts off her gratitude. He makes it clear this is a transaction, not romance. They are merely using each other in a cold contract marriage. The terms are set for 6 months. Elise knows well how desperate the king is to see his brother continue the bloodline. The condition is absolute. Within half a year, she must successfully conceive the Archduke's child. The Archduke issues a warning. If she fails to bear a child within the time limit, he will reveal the truth to the Emperor himself. Her fate would then be in the king's hands. Elise notices the shift in his demeanor. The warmth is gone, replaced by a harsh, icy distance. She had braced herself for his coldness, expecting it. Yet, seeing it in person strikes a painful blow to her heart. Sensing his disinterest, a new fear takes root. If he despises her, he might reject her when the time comes for their marital duties. Without that intimacy, there can be no child. The Archduke notices the flush rising on her cheeks and finds the reaction unexpectedly cute. The tension breaks into comedy as the two sit down to negotiate the unthinkable, a schedule for how many times a month they must perform their bedroom activities. But here's the kicker. No matter how many times she writes down, the Archduke frowns. It seems the number is far too low for his liking. Finally, they seal the deal with a rather steamy condition: as many nights together as possible each month. Poor, innocent Elise signs the contract without a second thought, completely unaware of the exhausting fate she has just scribbled her name onto. All she cares about is survival. This signature buys her another 6 months of life. And if she manages to conceive an heir, that deadline extends to 10. But Elise isn't planning to stick around. Her mind is already racing, plotting the perfect escape strategy to execute within those 6 months. Of course, when Lessid confronts her, she feigns innocence, vowing she has no intention of running away. Yet, when her wedding day finally dawns, the only emotion flooding Elise's heart is deep, bitter regret. The memory of her brother's voice echoes in her mind. He swore he would find her the perfect husband, a man who would cherish her, love her, and remain eternally faithful. In her dreams, she would have had the grandest wedding in the empire, bathed in blessings, but reality is cruel. Here she is, walking down the aisle, treated more like a prisoner than a bride. There are no cheering crowds or flowers. The only witnesses to this union are the cold-eyed Vangela Emperor and a handful of stoic soldiers. When the moment arrives to seal their vows, she freezes. She can't bring herself to do it. She silently begs for them to just fake the kiss. But Lessid has other plans. He takes charge, pulling her in for a real, passionate kiss. The Archduke has finally stopped fighting the storm brewing in his heart. His mind flashes back to his final confrontation with the king, who had fiercely questioned his decision to marry the fallen princess. The king wanted his brother to marry a proper noblewoman of Vangela and simply steal Elise's child once it was born. It wasn't that he hated the princess. He just hated seeing his foolish brother fall into the trap of a woman he believed was seducing him solely for survival. Lessid knows the king's logic is sound. He cannot say for certain if this feeling burning in his chest is truly love just yet. But one thing is clear: if he feels even the slightest spark of interest, he will seize it. There is no reason for a man of his power to hesitate. The prize of this marriage is the princess herself, the woman he has desired. And so, he decides there is absolutely no need to hold back his cravings. With that resolve, he deepens the kiss, stealing her breath until her face burns a bright crimson. From this moment on, they are officially bound as husband and wife. The ceremony ends abruptly, and the Archduke wastes no time. He immediately sweeps his new bride away from the capital. However, not everyone celebrates this union. Elise's new maid, Ibessa, watches with a heavy heart, finding the whole situation pitiful. The princess looked absolutely radiant in her wedding dress, yet the cold Archduke barely spared her a glance. When Elise humbly suggests she wasn't that beautiful to begin with, Ibessa nearly explodes with indignation. She insists that every soldier present couldn't take their eyes off her. Perhaps they stared a little too much, but the gaze of the soldiers means nothing to Elise. The only eyes she wanted on her were the Duke's. Suddenly, the man himself appears, demanding she join him for a walk. Elise flinches, worried that something terrible has happened. She's completely unprepared for Lessid's sudden shift in demeanor. He gently touches her face, his voice laced with concern that sitting in the carriage too long might have made her ill. Then, he shocks her further by inviting her to ride atop his horse with him. It isn't just the maid. The soldiers are frozen in shock. Their jaws drop as they watch the typically cold Archduke sharing his steed with the princess. Elise feels like she might die of embarrassment under the intense scrutiny, terrified that their public display is making everyone uncomfortable. But she is mistaken. Those aren't looks of judgment, they are looks of admiration. Lessid notices his men gawking at his wife, and his jealousy flares. He shoots them a warning glare before aggressively covering the princess's face with a massive hood to hide her away. There is just one small problem. The poor princess is now completely blind. The hood is so large it covers even her eyes. Lessid refuses to remove it, insisting he will be her eyes and guide her. But beneath his care, he is actually frustrated with her. He assumes she must have felt cramped and stiff inside the carriage, but refused to complain to him. He desperately wants Elise to voice her needs so he can fulfill them. But the truth our girl was perfectly comfortable in that carriage. Back in Argon, she spent her entire life confined to her bedroom. Being cooped up indoors is second nature to her. Lesed is stunned to hear this. He thought she was a prisoner in the palace, but Elise explains that her own frailty was the cage. She was always sick. Even a brief moment outside would leave her bedridden and in pain for days. A wave of sadness hits Elise as she recalls the rare days her brother would visit, and they would stroll through the gardens together. She would always fall ill afterward, but it didn't matter. It was the price she gladly paid for time with him. But as she speaks of her past, a sudden realization strikes her. She hasn't fallen sick in several days. She was dragged on a grueling month-long journey to Vangela and spent 5 days rotting in a cold prison cell. Yet, miraculously, her body's fine. Even her past injuries have nearly vanished. Lesed grumbles that she is healing too slowly, but Elise immediately corrects him. This is the fastest she has ever recovered. It has only been 10 days, which is a miracle for her. Elise struggles to understand this sudden vitality until she remembers Andre's promise that she would get better. His words were becoming reality. Lesed looks at his fragile wife with a breaking heart, wondering how she endured such a painful life. He has never encountered a creature as delicate as her. Not only did handcuffs leave deep bruises, but they took 10 whole days to fade. Suddenly, a new worry plagues him with a body this weak. How will she ever survive their nighttime activities? And just like that, his mind wanders down a very dark, very inappropriate path. He catches himself just in time, masking his concern by suggesting they break for rest at a nearby village. Elise frets over his stamina, a worry that nearly kills the eavesdropping soldiers with shock, a dragonborn. Tired, the very idea is laughable, but Elise's anxiety remains. Suddenly, a sharp sound cuts through the air. She screams for Lesed to halt his horse. Death is coming for them. Our heroine's senses are supernatural. Not only does she hear the threat, she pinpoints the exact location of the invisible assassins. She guides the Archduke's gaze to the shadows, and then the trap springs. The sky turns black as a volley of arrows screams toward them. The Duke prepares for a slaughter, but his heart is divided. He cannot risk Elise in the crossfire. He commands Sir Reuben to whisk her away immediately. Fear grips Elise, but not for herself. She clings to the Duke for a fleeting second, whispering a desperate prayer for his survival. Lesed dives into the fray, a whirlwind of steel. Meanwhile, Elise is dragged to a sanctuary. But safety is a lie in this forest. The enemy attacks are coordinated, focusing all malice on the fleeing pair. An arrow finds its mark, piercing Sir Reuben's chest, yet the loyal knight fights on. But Elise's eyes go wide with horror. She notices a vile sheen on the arrow tips. Deadly poison. Even if the wound doesn't kill him, the venom coursing through his veins will. Without a cure, the brave knight is a dead man walking. A chill runs down her spine. She recognizes these weapons from her escape from Argon, the signature of the ruthless Ugal warriors. While the soldiers rage, guilt crashes over Elise like a tidal wave. These men are dying because of her. She clenches her fists, desperate to change their fate. Andre's teachings echo in her mind, unlocking the arcane secrets within. She hesitates no more, summoning her will. She activates the ancient formula. Boom! A blinding white light explodes outward. The magic takes shape, forming an impenetrable defensive circle around them. Lesed had his suspicions, but Yannick is seething. The enemy commander steps from the darkness, convinced the Duke only wed the princess to harvest her magical potential. Clearly, there is a deep secret behind why Andre protected her with his life, and Yannick believes the Duke is part of the conspiracy. In Yannick's twisted mind, it all makes sense. He is certain Lesed married her solely to exploit this hidden power. But how wrong he is. Lesed knows nothing of schemes. He protects her because he has fallen hopelessly in love. Yannick, amused by his own delusions, laughs. He issues a final ultimatum. Hand over the princess's head, or I will erase you from existence. But the fool forgot who he was dealing with. The Archduke is no mere mortal with a roar that shakes the earth. Our male lead unleashes his true form, the dragon. His voice booms like thunder. He mocks Yannick's stupidity. To ambush a dragon's knights is to sign one's own death warrant. Rage boils in Lesed's blood. He has long despised the third prince of Ugal, whose filthy eyes dared to look upon Elise with lust. Judgment has arrived with a single, devastating strike. He erases the insect from existence. Yet, with his final breath, the dying prince spits a curse. He warns that the princess will swallow Lesid's soul and vanish, just as she did to her brother. Victory is short-lived. A report shatters the Duke's world. The princess's carriage has plummeted off the cliff. Rewind a few minutes. Silence had fallen inside the carriage. Elise and her maid breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking the danger had passed, Elise's magic waned. Exhaustion setting in, she began to worry for the Duke. But then footsteps, instinct took over. She shoved her maid to safety just as a shadowed figure rammed the carriage into the abyss. Lesid arrives at the precipice, his heart pounding in his chest. A barbarian assassin had been lying in wait, striking the moment her shield flickered. He sent the carriage hurtling into the void. Sir Reuben, clutching his wound, begs for permission to lead a rescue party down the ravine, but the Duke freezes. A dark, intrusive thought whispers in his mind. Perhaps death is a mercy. To survive means a life of agony. To be torn apart bearing a dragon's child. Or to be hunted forever. Or worse, to be dragged before the Emperor and executed if her secrets are exposed. Every path before her leads to misery. The future holds only pain for his beloved. Would it not be kinder to let the cold lake claim her? He wavers. But his heart screams the answer. He cannot let her go. Ignoring logic, he leaves a confused Reuben behind and dives. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface, our female lead is fading. Hope abandons her. It feels like a cruel joke, fighting so hard only to drown in the dark. She thinks, I should have died in Argon. At least then, she would have perished with the dignity of a princess. Darkness closes in. But a memory sparks. Andre's face appears in the void. He speaks of sacrifice, how he died so she could rise. You are destined for greatness, his ghost whispers. Only by living can you fulfill your potential. He makes her swear to never surrender. That promise reignites the fire in her soul. She refuses to end here, just like she promised. She fights back. A brilliant shockwave of magic bursts from her drowning form, and suddenly, a strong hand grips hers. It is him. Lesid could not bear a world without her. He pulls her from the jaws of death, sealing their fate together. Fate intervened just in time. He dragged her cold body from the watery abyss, desperation fueling his movements. He pumped breath into her lungs, performing CPR relentlessly until her eyes finally fluttered open. Seeing the raw terror etched on his face, a startling realization hit Elise. She wasn't alone. There was someone else in this world who desperately wanted her to survive. With a weak but proud smile, she whispered to him, Sir, it seems I have cheated death once again. Elise and Andre might share an unbreakable bond now, but their past was not always so picture perfect. Dark shadows once lingered between them, born from a time when she bitterly resented her brother simply for being born healthy. In those days, Elise was a prisoner of her own bed. Her existence was so fragile that even the royal physicians marveled that her heart continued to beat at all. Envy poisoned her heart as she watched Andre enjoy the vibrant health she was denied. She despised her sickness. She hated being the broken doll. She was fading away, literally. Her lustrous brown hair turned to snow white as her vitality drained. Yet, her brother tried everything to bring a smile to her pale lips, doing his absolute best to comfort her. But every time she voiced her pain, Andre's expression would crumble. Seeing his heartbreak became more painful to her than her own physical suffering. And so, she silenced her cries. She began wearing a mask of wellness, constantly insisting she was fine to protect his feelings. She tried to heal his heart, but the cost was her own deteriorating body. Bottling up her agony led her into a deep abyss of depression. Unable to bear the torture any longer, she swallowed all her medicine at once, seeking an escape into eternal sleep. That day, Andre fell to his knees, begging her not to die. He took all the blame, cursing his own powerlessness to save the sister he loved so dearly. From the ashes of that tragedy, a new resolve was born. He began inscribing complex magic circles directly onto her body. They were spells of every kind: attack, defense, and even terrifying self-destruction arrays. Yet, there was one specific circle whose purpose he kept secret. The very first one he etched into her skin. Back in the present, Leda made a command decision to halt their journey and stay in a nearby village. He turned a deaf ear to his wife's protests. Despite her insisting she was fine, he declared she needed rest, and his word was law. She tried to prove her strength, arguing that she had no broken bones. She refused to be treated like glass. She assumed it was her brother's magic that saved her, but as she recalled the moment, a strange feeling washed over her. It felt as if the power had erupted from within her own soul. Could she be the one wielding the magic? Her thoughts were interrupted by Reuben, who arrived to deliver bathwater and, more grimly, to accept his punishment. Les looked down at the trembling subordinate. His voice was ice cold as he ordered Reuben to punish the soldiers, and himself, until the stroke of midnight. Elise tried to intervene, finding the punishment too harsh, but Leto stood firm, declaring they deserved every stroke for failing their singular duty to protect her. He silenced her pleas instantly, then came the shock. Since her maid had injured her arm, she would be unavailable to assist Elise tonight. That left only one option. The Archduke himself would be the one attending to her needs. Panic seized Elise's heart, and she nearly fainted from the sheer embarrassment. She tried to protest, but he coolly reminded her of their reality. They were husband and wife. There was no shame in a husband serving his wife or sharing a bed. Yet, every fiber of Elise's being wanted to escape this intimacy. She stammered out excuse after excuse until he had enough. Suddenly, he pulled her close and began to unlace her dress with steady hands. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Softly, he begged her not to push him away. Faced with such unexpected gentleness, Elise found her resistance melting away. He was immovable. He would not leave her side. She steeled herself, realizing this intimacy was inevitable now that their lives were bound by marriage. As he continued to undress her, a shadow crossed his face. Beneath his gentle touch, she noticed a simmering anger. Later, submerged in the bath, our female lead was lost in thought. Her mind raced back to that surge of strange power. It was the exact same sensation she felt when she slew that soldier. She didn't understand the mechanics, but her body was definitely undergoing a terrifying transformation. What had her brother truly done to her? Her worries shifted to her husband, whose earlier anger still weighed heavily on her mind. She mustered the courage to ask him what was wrong. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. His tone dropped, turning frigid. She was certain he blamed her. After all, since she arrived, she had been nothing but a burden to him. Because of her, they were ambushed. His men faced death, and their vital journey was stalled. Guilt consumed her, until Letty's voice cut through the darkness. He wasn't angry with her. The anger was directed at himself. He reminded her of the terms of their sacred contract. His duty was to shield her from all harm while she bore his heir. But today, he had failed. He had broken his vow. She had every right to be furious with him. He berated himself for leaving her side, admitting that his own thoughts were becoming a chaotic mess he could no longer understand. He had abandoned his command post to duel Janok, driven by a blind rage simply because he despised the way that man looked at her with lust-filled eyes. And yet, because of his distraction, he had nearly allowed the lake to claim her life. He bowed his head in apology to the princess. His voice was steel as he swore a blood oath that such a failure would never happen again. Elise couldn't resist the moment. With a playful glint in her eye, she teased him, asking if she really meant that much to him. She expected a denial. Instead, he stunned her. He declared her the most precious existence he had ever sworn to protect. For the remaining 6 months of their contract, she would be his world. He begged her not to push him away, confessing that she was the only anchor he had left. She realized then that she had lost everything else. In this vast, dangerous world, the only thing she could truly rely on was this man, and the fragile bond of their marriage contract. Elise realizes the grim truth of her situation. If Liette had decided to turn his back on her, she would have met a watery grave at the bottom of that lake today. No one else would have bothered to save her. Aside from this man, there is no sanctuary left in this cold world for our desperate heroine. Stepping away from his side leads only to certain death. She clings to him, pleading for him to be her sole protector and never let another guard her again. From this moment on, he vows to be her shadow. Liette loses his resolve and promises never to leave her side. Later that night, the couple attempts to find rest. However, Sir Liette finds sleep impossible. He stares into the darkness, completely baffled by what is plaguing his wife. She shivers endlessly, complaining of the cold. But every time he tries to warm her, the chill returns in an instant. He decides there is only one remedy left. He lifts her gently, placing her directly atop his broad chest. Elise stirs awake at the movement, her eyes widening to find herself resting on him. When she asks what is happening, he claims he is simply trying to transfer body heat. And indeed, Elise finally feels the warmth returning to her bones. Or perhaps, she is flushing because the position is far too intimate. Her face burns a brilliant shade of crimson when she feels something rigid pressing against her. Leet whispers for her to simply pay it no mind. But honestly, how is she supposed to ignore something like that? Without missing a chance to tease her, he settles her right onto his lap and casually says this is the perfect chance for her to get accustomed to it. He reminds her that she was the one who craved this. He still vividly remembers all the times she practically begged for it. The air is thick enough to cut with a knife. It is getting way too intense for my innocent eyes to watch. Flustered by the proximity, our girl shifts uncomfortably, desperately trying to wiggle free. But every movement just adds fuel to the fire. The situation turns even more precarious, yet less remains a stone wall. He grits his teeth, forcing his inner beast to stay in its cage through sheer willpower. Given the princess's delicate constitution, caution was mandatory. Without the proper preparations, she might simply shatter the moment he laid a hand on her. To Les, the princess is not merely a woman, but the most radiant being he has ever held in his arms. You see, ever since he was a child, Les possessed a peculiar instinct. He simply cannot resist chasing after anything that glitters and shines, and playfully, she whispers, "Sir, I have golden hair." The couple finally arrives near Royer, Leet's home region, and the view leaves them breathless. Elise is absolutely captivated by the sheer beauty unfolding before her eyes. It is a paradise embraced by lush green mountains and incredibly fertile soil. But the true miracle of this land, even in the dead of winter, it defies nature and remains warm and inviting. This is the crown jewel of the north, the blessed sanctuary of vanilla. And for the next 6 months, this magnificent territory will be the place she calls home. The moment they reach the castle gates, a wave of servants rushes out to meet them. They bow to the Archduke, of course, but their eyes betray their true desire. Everyone is dying to catch a glimpse of his stunning new bride. His most trusted inner circle has gathered. Even the butler Alfredo, his personal aide S, and the head maid Patson are all present. He could not help but worry that something bizarre had happened. But Patson shattered his confusion with a sharp truth. The one acting strange was him. The rumors were no mere whispers. Sir Reuben confirmed the impossible. The Duke had actually married, and as if to prove the impossible true, Elise stepped into the light, silencing all doubts with her presence. Shockwaves rippled through the household. The servants could barely believe their eyes. Whispers spread like wildfire, especially witnessing the usually cold Duke Lacid doting on his new wife with such tender affection. But amidst the commotion, one man stood on the verge of tears, the poor butler. He was drowning in a mountain of paperwork that the Duke was blissfully ignoring to play the lover. The master of the house shouldn't be wasting precious time like this, yet frustration wasn't the only emotion brewing in the shadows. Not everyone welcomed this sudden union. Headmaid Patson's eyes narrowed with cold disapproval. She learned the Archduke had defied the king's direct orders for this woman, and that dangerous rebellion did not sit well with her. Just what kind of enchantress had twisted their master's judgment? Patson watched like a hawk, determined to uncover exactly what made this woman so terribly special. Lacid lingered, desperate to steal just one more moment with Elise, but she stood firm, pushing him toward his duties. Guilt already weighed on her for delaying their journey, and she refused to be the reason his work suffered too. But the Duke was relentless. Panic flashed in his eyes at the thought of her wandering the vast castle alone. What if she got lost in the labyrinth of corridors? Elise calmly reminded him that Sir Reuben was there to escort her. Lacide, however, scoffed openly. His disdain for the knight was palpable after all. This was the man who had failed to protect her once before. Poor Sir Reuben cried out in protest, defending his honor, but Lacide wasn't listening. The thought of leaving his wife alone with strangers, even his own staff, left a bitter taste in his mouth. Who was he trying to fool? It wasn't about safety. The truth was plain to see. He just wanted to be the one by her side. Elise, however, needed breathing room and insisted on learning the castle independently. Sparks flew as they bickered back and forth, completely forgetting their stunned audience of servants watching every move. The onlookers exchanged knowing glances. The Duke had finally met his match in their stubbornness and fire. These two were undeniably cut from the same cloth. After wasting valuable time in a deadlock, the argument finally snapped. Elise's voice dropped, admitting that his hovering made her feel like nothing more than a burden. That silenced him. Lacide opened his mouth to retort, but Elise cut him off. Turning away, she commanded the butler to begin the tour immediately. As Elise and the butler departed, Sir Reuben approached the sulking Duke. He urged his liege to catch his breath and rest before diving into the chaos of work. The knight promised that the headmaid and butler were more than capable of caring for the princess, but Lycid's eyes darkened instantly. He wasn't angry about the care, he was furious at the title. A cold resolve settled over him. He refused to let his people attach the title of wife to her, knowing all too well that she wouldn't be keeping that name for long. Meanwhile, the butler guided Elise through the grand halls, treating her with delicate care as he unveiled the secrets of the castle. Looking out at the territory, realization washed over Elise. This land was truly blessed by the heavens, a natural fortress that offered perfect sanctuary from the outside world. Yet, a chill lingered in her heart. She could not afford to let her guard down. Was this castle truly a sanctuary? Or merely a gilded cage waiting to trap her? Barely an hour had passed, but Lycide could not stay away. Overcome with worry, he swept his little wife into his arms, holding her close as if she were the most precious treasure in existence. He issued a stern warning, making it clear that rejecting his help wasn't an option. His schedule for the day was already packed to the brim, leaving zero room for argument. If her fragile health falters again, his focus will shatter completely. He cannot afford to lose his composure now. Elise has no intention of rejecting his touch, surrendering as he sweeps her up into his arms. Of course, he doesn't miss the chance to tease her, joking that her slow pace would have taken an entire hour to climb the stairs. Back in the sanctuary of her room, Abessa prepares a steaming bath, ready to help the princess wash away the fatigue of the journey. However, peace is a luxury she cannot afford. Before she can even rest, trouble marches through the door. The headmaid has arrived, and she did not come alone. A swarm of servants trails behind her, claiming they are here to serve the princess. But the tension in the air says otherwise. Elise tries to protest, but her voice dies in her throat when the headmaid icily reminds her of her condition. She almost slipped up, she's supposed to be pregnant. But this maid is a shark smelling blood. She is not easily fooled, and her disdain for Elise is written plainly on her face. She hasn't just brought maids, she has brought the castle's physician. She demands a checkup for the princess and the royal heir immediately. This is a calculated ambush. Patson deliberately ignored the physician from Vangela and brought her own man. Elise feels anxiety clawing at her throat. She's about to be exposed. She knows Lycide would never be this careless. He is too calculating, too protective to have leaked their secret to a stranger. That means Patson is acting on her own accord. The woman suspects the truth and is hunting for proof that this pregnancy is a sham. No matter how firmly Elise refuses, the headmaid does not back down. She insists, hiding her malice behind a veil of concern for her master's heir. The cold reality hits Elise. This isn't Argan, where she was safe. Here, she is isolated, and no one is willing to listen to her commands. With no other choice, she steels herself and allows the examination to proceed. Just like the previous doctors, the physician finds nothing in her pulse, but Patson is relentless. She suggests he draw blood to find the truth. Elise remains silent, frozen in fear, but her maid can no longer stand and watch. Abessa explodes, scolding Patson for her cruelty. She demands to know why they won't even let the exhausted princess rest before coming at her with needles. Protective fury takes over. She shoves the physician away, physically blocking them from touching her mistress. Finally, Elise finds her voice. She declares that no ordinary doctor can understand her unique condition except the one brought by the Archduke. She scoffs at Patson, mocking her for being so daring. The headmaid is forced to apologize, but Elise has no intention of letting this slight go unpunished. She seizes the moments to clear the room. She dismisses the swarm of maids, telling Patson that she requires only one attendant besides Abessa. Crowds make her uncomfortable. Her eyes narrow as she challenges Patson, asking if the House of Rier is so fragile that having fewer maids is considered a disgrace. She issues a sharp warning, do not make her repeat herself. The maids retreat, but Abessa is still trembling with rage. The loyal maid knows the truth. Those women didn't come to serve. They came to spy and create chaos for Elise. She begs Elise to report this insolence to the Duke immediately, but Elise refuses. She has realized a hard truth in this castle. She is truly alone. Patson holds a deep grudge against her. If that woman discovers the pregnancy is a lie, she won't hesitate to report it directly to the Emperor to destroy them. Elise desperately needs an ally, and right now, the only person she can turn to is her personal maid, Abessa. She looks Abessa in the eye, reminding the girl of how she once saved her life. Then, she asks the ultimate question, is she ready to change masters to repay that debt? She knows Abessa is loyal to the Duke, but Elise needs her to betray him. She needs the girl to prioritize her safety above all else in this snake pit of a castle. Elise knows she cannot keep up the charade around Abessa forever. It is time for a gamble, to secure the girl's absolute trust. She looks her in the eye and reveals the dangerous truth: she is not actually pregnant. Meanwhile, Lycid sits in his study, listening to the physician's report. The doctor assures him that the princess is in perfect health. As long as she maintains her nutrition, she will remain strong. Lycid had ordered the physician to explain the brutal reality of a dragonborn birth to Elise, and he is curious about her reaction. It turns out, the reaction was quite amusing. Abessa was the only one horrified to learn that a dragonborn baby essentially eats its mother alive. Dragonborn infants are more monster than human. Lycid is the only exception in history to have not been a complete beast. From the moment they take shape in the womb, they become parasites, draining every ounce of the mother's life force. Even if a mother survives the full 10 months, she will be too weak to push. The baby has no choice but to tear her stomach open to crawl into the world. But shockingly, Elise wasn't worried about the gruesome death that awaited her. Her concern was far more intimate. The physician had warned her to avoid the season at all costs. This is the season when a dragon's bloodlust peaks. Dragonborns are consumed by an overwhelming desire to either kill or indulge in carnal pleasure. That is why Lycid spends so much time on the battlefield. The madness in his blood will not settle until he sees a river of blood or engages in intense physical exertion. The physician warned the princess to be prepared for long, stamina-draining sessions in the bedroom. What made Lycid laugh the hardest was hearing Elise's genuine concern. She actually asked if his size would be too much for her to handle. He knows she isn't worried about the child because of her magic, but it seems everyone else is terrified on her behalf. The physician issues a solemn warning: the Duke must be incredibly gentle during their moments of intimacy. Although the princess is recovering, she remains as fragile as glass, far weaker than any ordinary woman. More importantly, she is a pure soul with zero experience in these matters. Her delicate body simply cannot withstand any rough handling from Leto. Les takes the advice without offense and dismisses the doctor. However, the atmosphere shifts as the headmaid, Patson, enters the room. Les confronts her immediately, his voice cold as he reprimands her for her recent behavior. Patson offers an apology, but she didn't come here to bow her head. She stands before Les not as a servant, but as the nanny who raised him. Indeed, she was the mother figure who nurtured him from childhood. To her, the mighty Duke is almost like her own flesh and blood. Her only wish is for him to marry for love. Yet, her motherly intuition screams that he holds no romantic love for Elise. In fact, the way he looks at the princess mirrors the way the young Les once gazed upon the emperor for the very first time. It is a look of deep, fanatical admiration. That same worshipful expression appears every single time his eyes land on the princess. To Patson, it is painfully clear the Archduke does not see Elise as a lover to cherish, but as a master to obey and idolize. Les flatly rejects Patson's analysis, claiming his feelings are nothing of the sort. But the old woman has watched him for too long to be fooled. Upon hearing the rumor that the princess is carrying his child, she instantly recognized it for what it was: a blatant lie. She demands the truth. Why did Les bring this girl to Rodier? Les simply replies that he did it because he wanted to. His tone sharpens into a warning. She may be his nanny, but asking any further questions would be crossing a dangerous line. He dismisses her, but Patson refuses to let it go. She knows the Duke only admires perfection because he harbors a deep hatred for his own flawed self. Before leaving, she offers one final piece of advice: he needs to fulfill his duty and accompany his wife in the bedroom tonight. Meanwhile, the princess is trapped in a nightmare, haunted once again by her brother, but this time, his face is twisted in rage. He is no longer the perfect, golden boy she remembers. He stands before her covered in gruesome wounds, with one eye missing. He screams at her, furious that she would even consider bearing a child for Kirsten Led. Elise pleads with the Phantom, insisting it was her only choice. She needed to survive, and this contract was the only path. But Andre ignores her logic, begging her to run away this instant. He tries to speak again, but his voice fades into silence. Elise wakes up screaming his name, confused why he haunts her now after being absent during her journey. The cold reality hits her harder than the dream her husband has once again failed to share her bed. It has already been a week since her arrival in Rodier, and nearly a month since the ink dried on their contract. Yet, absolutely nothing has happened between them. Frustration boils over as she realizes Lizzie has failed to keep his promise. But just because the man refuses to devour her doesn't mean Elise will accept defeat. She resolves to provoke him until he loses control. Determination sets in. She dresses in her most revealing, scandalous outfit and goes hunting for him. She is ready to tempt him into sin. However, her grand seduction hits a wall when she arrives at the Duke's office. Les isn't there. Instead, she runs straight into Patson and a legion of maids. The head maid immediately steps in to cover the tempting view Elise prepared for the Duke. To make matters worse, Elise notices that every single maid in this palace is breathtakingly beautiful. Jealousy pricks at our heroine's heart, especially since the Duke has been avoiding her for so long. She demands to know how these women were chosen. Patson admits she and the butler selected most of them, but she is ready to provoke Elise today. Patson drops a bombshell. Several of these beautiful maids were actually sent by the Emperor to be the Duke's marriage partners. In other words, they were sent here specifically to satisfy Lette's bedroom desires. The shock on Elise's face is undeniable. If you are dying to know how she handles this revelation, please comment below for part 2. Until next time, ciao.